Good morning. My name is Greg Upton. I'm the Executive Director and an Associate Research Professor here at the LSU Center for Energy Studies. Thank you for joining us today, and a special welcome to those of you who may not be familiar with CES, as we call it. CES is a unique research unit at LSU. We were established by the legislature in 1982, and we provide energy information and analysis that responds to the needs of the legislature, public agencies, businesses, civic organizations, as well as the general public. The majority of our funding comes from the legislature through LSU, but we also participate in sponsored research through federal and state agencies as well as private companies. We take pride in our diverse constituency and funding sources, which allows us to conduct analysis insulated from political or economic bias. I won't name them all now, but please see the chat for a full list of our sustaining members who provide endowed contributions that support our work. If your organization is not yet a sustaining member, we encourage you to join our community. I also want to mention that we're in the process of reorganizing CES as well as the Louisiana Geological Survey, as well as the Institute for Energy Innovation into a single LSU Energy Institute. We're actively working with the legislature on the statutory changes needed to implement this reorganization, and you'll see a link in the chat to the soft launch of the new Energy Institute website, which we'll be announcing more broadly soon, as well as a lot of our data tools that we've put out in response to Act 727 of 2 years ago. So please check that out. With that introduction, I want to pivot to today's webinar, what to expect in the 2026 legislative session regarding energy and natural resources. As we approach the start of the legislative session, which of course begins Monday, today's conversation is designed to provide context on what kinds of energy-related legislation we may see, and how recent legislative task forces might shape this discussion moving forward. While much of the work touches, of course, the natural resources committees, which we have the two chairmen here today, of course, a lot of this goes through other committees as well. A quick note for those less familiar with Louisiana's legislative calendar. This is a non-fiscal session. And so under the state constitution, during regular sessions that begin in even number years, the legislature is prohibited from considering legislation related to exemptions, exclusions, deductions, or credits. So in other words, many types of tax legislation that we saw last year, for instance, are off the table for discussion this year. And so for those of you who followed last year, you might recall that there was big severance tax changes that were made that won't be happening this year. As of this morning, I'm counting approximately 950 House bills that have been pre-filed, another 400 or so Senate bills, so plenty of reading, and for a combined total somewhere in the ballpark of 1,400 bills. Note that the legislators are allowed to file an additional 5 bills once session begins, so the total could come closer to 2,000 or so, depending upon, again, what folks file. Of those, we have about 75 bills currently pending in House Natural Resources. Of course, not all of these are energy related. About 25 pending Senate Natural Resources. And personally, I'm tracking somewhere in the ballpark of about 50 bills right now that I would consider energy related. So that just kind of gives you scope on the quantity of bills that we're looking at. I want to note too, real quick, that before I introduce the panel, I want to briefly mention the Clean Hydrogen Task Force, which was created by House Concurrent Resolution 64 of 2025 regular session. I had the opportunity to serve on that task force along with Representative Orgeron, who couldn't make it today. That task force is now concluded, and we're planning a separate webinar just to really focus on that issue. So for those of you who are looking for hydrogen, it might be a notable omission today. We will be doing more on that soon. That said, now we're fortunate to introduce our panel, to have 3 legislators who sit at the center of energy and natural resource policy in Louisiana. First, we'll start on the House side. We have Representative Brett Geymann. He's the chair of House Natural Resources and Environment Committee. And for those who watch these energy issues, know that he is at the intersection of all of them. We next have Senator Bob Hengens, who chairs the Senate Natural Resource Committee, who again has been really instrumental, especially with the reorganization of the Department of Conservation and Energy that we'll talk about here shortly. And we're also pleased to have Senator Beth Mizell. Senator Mizell served as the chair of the Task Force on Energy Infrastructure and Modernization that was created by Senate Resolution 195 of the 2025 regular session. And she also serves as the chair of the Senate Committee on Commerce, Consumer Protection, and International Affairs. So we're really pleased to have a rock star group of legislators today to talk about what is happening this upcoming session. I want to mention a real quick housekeeping thing. You can put anything in the Q&A. Those questions will come to us, and we will be reviewing them through the webinar. And so, of course, we've got some introductory questions, but I really want to try to work in questions from you, the audience. So please feel free to type the questions at any time, and we will try to answer as many as possible. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and posted afterward, so any self-identifying information could be included in that. So with that, I'm going to start with Senator Mizell. Can you talk a little bit about the Task Force on Energy Infrastructure and Modernization? Give broad background. What did the task force cover? What was some of the things maybe you learned from it? And then how this might impact this upcoming legislative session. So, Senator Mizell, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. I'm in the big league over here with these energy guys, Bob and Brett, so I'm honored to be here. This was not my bill. The Energy Task Force was the Senate President's bill. So in talking, I don't want to. I'm going to give my interpretation of what I believe our goal is. Our goal is to look at pretty much what questions need to be asked at where as to where we are with the projects being developed, where the electricity needs of the state are going, where is the voice of the consumer and the concerns that we all should have, that what we're doing is impacting the consumer. So I believe, this morning I'm thinking about this. We are in such an unknown territory as to the steps we're going as a society that uses energy. We've never had the needs being discussed that we're having now. And the intent of the task force would be to put all that on the table, look at what we're doing for the short-term benefit of the state, but the long-term benefit of the citizens. And really right now, my Senator Hengens, I don't know if you'd agree with this, but we've spent most of our time kind of defending the decisions we've already made rather than looking at what the consequences would be down the road. So I'm hoping as we go further, we will have refined, if we don't have the answers, we'll have refined the questions that need to be asked very specifically to get out of the zone we're in right now. So that's as I see it. We've got some incredible participants in the task force. Every sector of the energy community is represented, and lots of voices, some really good conversations. But I think we just kind of opened Pandora's box on that.
Greg, if I could chime in, being Beth's co-chair, and first of all, Greg, you and Andrew, thank you so much. This is not Beth and I's Tallywick, and you have both educated us very well in the last 6 months. We're learning what we don't know, and we really appreciate you all for that. I just wanted to get that out there.
Thank you.
And I agree with Beth. I mean, I think I didn't know what Cameron was doing when he did what he did, this president. I'll be honest with you, but I'm glad he did. As legislators, we've punted this to the PSC for the last 30 years. And since 1970, electricity usage is barely going up anywhere in the country. And so it really didn't matter. And now all of a sudden we're building plants to have 2.5 times the electricity usage of the city of New Orleans. And we should be looking at whatever is possible to make sure that we're protecting our retail customers through that process. And I think that's where Beth and I are trying to get. I don't think we've gotten there yet. Beth's right. We've probably talked around each other a lot so far. This week, we dropped a mock bill, or was that last week, Beth? That was last week?
That was last week, yeah.
They flying. We dropped the mock bill so Beth and I can kind of get the argument. Don't give me the argument was clearly said that the Public Service Commissioner does this, not you, so you can't do this. Give me the arguments why the bill's good, where the bill's bad, how to fix it, and how will that affect us. Tell me how this bill would raise utility rates, because that's what the utility companies would tell me. Tell me how this bill, when it says all infrastructure costs has to belong to the microgrid, how would that raise retail rates? Because that's what PSC tells me. So we want to hear those arguments, and I think it's going to take us some more time. It's going to get extended because we're not there yet, ready to write a report, unless Beth thinks differently.
Well, no, I'm right with you, but I just want to add the real opportunity for us to learn is to look at other states that are suffering the consequences, and not only the impact to the consumers and the pushback. I mean, you've got moratoriums being put in place out there. I was talking to some. I mean, we're such a red state. Red candidates lost because of their lack of protection to consumers building these large projects. So that's a serious consideration for a lot of people. Even if you're not interested in energy or any of this conversation, you better darn well do what you're elected to do for the protection of your citizens. So I think that's where a lot of people would be pulled into the conversation, like it or not.
So are we going to extend the task force another year? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Oh, awesome.
Yes.
Okay, very
Yes.
good.
Oh yeah, I love that. Greg thinks it's awesome, Bob.
Yeah, yeah, you come sit on it. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
no, it is awesome. I'm enjoying it. I really am. It's been fun.
it's interesting.
Awesome. Well, we're going to pivot next to some oil and gas. So, Representative Geymann, of course, you had the oil and gas working group that you facilitated this off session. I think you brought together a really great group of legislators as well as industry participants. I'm honored to be participating in that and providing you guys information. Can you talk a little bit about that working group, kind of what you're looking at and what you might have learned?
Yeah, thank you, Greg. And I think hearing from Beth and Bob, you can already see that we're drinking out of a fire hose. All this stuff is coming at us, 100
Right.
miles an hour, and a lot of the new technology, the demand for energy, and in those conversations last session, it just kind of it kind of happened. A group of us were talking and said, "Well, we really need to kind of get out in front of this, and what can we do as legislators to make our state open and ready for what's coming, because we are definitely a target for a lot of this new energy and the demand for natural gas and all the things that are coming with it." So we put together a voluntary working group. You were a huge part of that, but the interesting thing about it, Chairman Hengens was on it as well. But the interesting thing about it was we brought in the actual industry people, and we talked directly with them. And the questions were, what can we do as legislators to help you? Like, what can we do to make Louisiana the most attractive place for energy companies to come and invest? Those are the type of questions that we led off with. And it was unfiltered because it came straight from energy, straight to the legislator, not filtered through other, channels such as lobbyists, et cetera. And it was just very fascinating, the conversations that we had and the engagement that the industry people had, being able to talk directly to, Chairman Hengens, about what they think Louisiana needs to do to be number one, to lead the Gulf Coast in energy production, and, traditional oil and gas that we know, how do we deal with demand for natural gas and all those things. And we traveled around the state, I think had four regional meetings to see different areas. And gosh, it was just, I enjoyed it. I think everyone in the group enjoyed it. And we learned a lot. And most of the things that came out of it were fiscal in nature, which we can't address this session. But there were a whole lot of components of things that need to be done, smaller puzzle pieces. And I think you'll begin to see members of the group begin to introduce some of those ideas and work with industry to try to solve some of those issues. And again, really, the goal was to make us the leader. What a great opportunity for Beth and Bob and myself to even be in the legislature right now with all of this opportunity. And yet we have to navigate it. And I heard Beth say something about you have to represent the people and what they want at the same time. And those challenges are challenges. And we're trying to navigate the best we can. But I want us to leave with knowing that we did what we could to make us the very best positioned state that we could be when all this opportunity is coming.
Great. So next we'll kind of pivot to the committees, what to expect. So I'm going to start with you, Senator Henskins. Of course, we had Act 458 of last year, which reorganized the Department of Conservation and Energy. It's I think a 227-page bill that I've got printed right on my nightstand, which has really helped me with my sleeping
Yeah,
issues last
right.
year, reading a reorganization of the State Department. But we joke, I mean, there were really big changes there. I know I see Senate Bill 379 might have a little bit of cleanup language, that kind of thing this year. So can you just talk a little bit about maybe what to expect in Senate Natural Resources and the process of what's going on with the reorg?
Thank you so much, Greg. And yeah, and listen, I just want to clarify that I was on Brett's panel just to spy on the House. That's the only reason I went to any of those meetings, to see what the House members were doing.
How'd we do, Bob? We behaved,
Um,
didn't we?
no, yeah, last year was a big. Y'all talked after I left, huh? Yeah, this session is on energy matters in the Senate Natural Resources. Pretty quiet. There are 4 carbon capture related bills that have been filed, and besides that, it's just really cleanup language from last year on SB 244. And so SB 244 last year, as we were moving into this new energy world, and actually data centers and stuff played into the reorg. Um, what we knew that we needed a one-stop shop to say what our resources are when we do these kind of things. If a data center comes, we have to know that we have the water resource to do it. So we put the Department of Conservation and Energy in charge of all the water aquifers in the state of Louisiana, for the simple reason that they can say, yes, we have this much water to give, or no, we don't have this much water to give. Um, the bill addressed some existing structures problems that we thought we had. The prior law established the Office of Conservation, led by a commissioner, to handle oil and gas regulations. 244 eliminated that and created a separate office, and it integrates its functions in the newly restructured department. And it was just really designed to better administrate the framework of the office and the oil and natural gas world and our natural resources. And this year, all we're really doing is a couple technical changes to the bill. It changes the Office of Mineral Resources to the Office of State Resources. And it also gives the Mineral Natural Resources Committee hearing on energy this year. And we'll be waiting to see.
All right, that sounds good. It
Did
was
I?
breaking up a little
Okay.
bit, but I think we got the most of it. So with that, I'm going to now pivot to you, Representative Geymann. So of course, last year that we kind of mentioned the big discussion was around severance tax, of course, and in your committee with CCS. What are you kind of anticipating this year in terms of legislation, and what do you see coming through your committee?
I think similar to last year, Greg, we're going to have a number of carbon capture related bills. I think we're in the 20s. If I glanced at the agenda so far or the sheet so far, but we have some bills that are related directly to oil and gas production and changes there. We have I have one on some emission protection from climate change lawsuits for industry overall. So we're getting around some other issues as well related to energy. But I think the sheer number is going to be largely dealing with carbon capture. I think Bob said he had 4. I think we're in the mid 20s. So we'll debate all those and clear some of those. The debate will be what it'll be, and the committee will vote to determine whether to move forward with any of those or not, or how many of those. But other than that, there's a handful of things that I think will be helpful to the industry overall. But the focus certainly seems to be on our side, mainly on the carbon capture piece.
Brett, that number, are you including eminent domain bills or the eminent domain bills related to carbon capture?
Yeah, Chairman Henskins, I think there's one. I think there's only one. There may be two. I think there's only one eminent domain bill by Speaker Pro Tem Johnson, and all the rest are going to be there's a number of local option bills, and then there's a number of bills just related of the topics around carbon capture, just related to that subject matter. Some are outright bans, and some are just dealing with particular issues, surrounding that, like where the hearings held and things like that. So it's some of them are not really carbon capture bills, but related to the carbon capture subject, if that makes sense.
Okay. Thank you.
So I know that last year we had the marathon day in House Natural Resources that went to midnight. I don't know. This year there's a lot of bills as well. Or are you thinking you'll probably break it up a little bit this year, or what are you thinking, Chairman Guyman?
Yeah, Greg, I think last year, all the authors of the bills on the House side met, and we discussed how to best roll out that large number of bills last year. And everyone thought it was a great idea to have it in one day, just really to keep people from having to travel back and forth so many times. And we're really trying to look at the overall picture, but it was a little much. And so this year, I think we're going to try, and I haven't met with the speaker yet to go over my plan on that, but we're going to try to probably break it down into category. We'll, like the local option bills at one time and eminent domain, and then maybe all the other related issues. But that's still fluid right now. But to answer your question, no, I don't anticipate us doing a 12-hour marathon again. Now, some of those bills will take a while, to be debated, but I don't anticipate us being there, at 11:30 at night, hopefully.
And Greg, I plan on a carbon capture day on it, whatever Brett and the Natural Resource Committee in the House send over, however many they are, I plan on one meeting for those bills.
Gotcha.
And let me add to that too. Senator Henskins and I always work. We share our plans, and so that we try to coordinate things the best we can between the two bodies, and we work very well together. And so we'll do the best we can to make this a fluid process that works as good as it can for everyone.
Indeed.
Yeah, and I'll just comment too that we did, we listened a lot last session and we put out a white paper on legal and regulatory issues associated with carbon sequestration. And so we've put that white paper in the chat. It was a partnership with the LSU Law School. So hopefully that can be a resources for folks. Okay, well that's great. So we've got some audience Q&A. I got a few more questions, and so audience, if you've got more questions, I'll kind of pivot between the two. So now's a good time to write them in. So one of the questions here is around bills filed on renewable energy generation projects. So I know Representative Guyman, you had a big solar bill last year. There's the rulemaking going on solar decommissioning that I think has provided clarity for folks this last year. What else should we expect on renewables and solar? I was looking through the bills. It seems like a little bit lighter year than last year, but just opening up the floor for any discussions on solar and wind.
Yeah, I'll jump in first. I don't see anything yet other than I think Representative Coates has a bill dealing with recycling of in the decommissioning process, and she's been working with the department and the industry on that. I don't know the final decision that they've reached on all of the components of that, but my understanding is that they're all working together and everyone is generally in agreement. So I don't anticipate at this point on our side anything controversial on renewable energy. Senator Henskins and his committee passed the decommissioning bill in 2023, I think.
That's
And
correct.
that rule is now out, I think, for public comment. And again, we're all in agreement as far as I know on that. We've worked very closely with both sides, the House and Senate and the department, to get that decommissioning plan where we think it should be to protect our state. And not hurt the industry, intentionally. Not, we don't want to hurt the industry in what we're doing. And I think we got there. I think we're all in agreement. So hopefully that'll be behind us as well. Senator Henskins' committee amended a bill last year to put in some state solar guidance on siting, and that was very helpful to the parishes who have no ordinances. And so I'm seeing that begin to work. By the way, Senator Hengens, thank you for that work, because I'm seeing it begin to work. And industry now has some knowledge of what to expect when they come here to do business. So I think all that's working out really well.
Yeah, and let me back up there and say that, Chairman Geymann and Representative Coates and I had good talks before the committee meeting and came up with what we thought was a good framework. No one's saying it's perfect, but I think we need to let it play out for a few years before we do anything else if we find any flaws in it. And yeah, as for decommissioning, we had very good meeting on it with the department. Brett Allain was on the phone with me constantly because this was his baby. And we got it to where the House was happy, the Senate was happy. We know the department's happy, and Brett Allain's happy. And I think that's where we are right now, unless something comes up that I don't see.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's great. All right, so another question I have, and it's about groundwater. Okay, surface water and groundwater resources in the state. So it's regarding, it asks specifically about data centers and specifically about CCS. So maybe I'll pitch this one to you, Senator Mizell. Has there been discussion of groundwater in your task force, and any thoughts from anyone on that? I think you're on mute.
I think that's been something that's shown to be a real problem across the country where the data centers are already up and running. But not to my knowledge, we haven't addressed the concerns there or laid out any guidelines on best practices for Louisiana on that. And frankly, we have enough problems. I have problems with water in my district all the time, and we don't have a data center. So I know Senator Mills had done a lot of work on protecting our water supply and in the quality of water that gets to the families that use the drinking water. So this is going to be something that's going to have to be part of the conversation. It's not part of energy, but maybe with the secretary, he can look at this as part of natural resources in the overall picture. I haven't heard the conversation about it. Have you guys?
Yes, and a little bit, Greg. And with your now colleague, Tyler Gray, had a lot of the work in SB 244 last year, the big ugly bill. And one of his big things was he wanted one authority to have the authority over groundwater in the state of Louisiana. And that was the Department of Conservation and Energy. And his main reason for it was he needs to be able to, conservation and energy needs to be able to know where the groundwater excess is and where they don't have enough of it. And where the Mississippi aquifer is, where the Meta project's going, it replenishes itself very well. So they know they're safe there. If they try to put one around Ruston, the answer is going to be probably no, we don't have the water there in the Sparta. So I think it is being dealt with through the department, but in the task force, I don't think we've given it much conversation.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, we did in our energy outlook this last year put data centers in context in terms of energy demand. But maybe that would be a good thing for us to go look at is, what is put it in context in terms of water usage. And I think that's definitely in the domain of, at that kind of intersection of energy and water. So that's an important
But
topic. So thanks for
but
asking.
Greg, if I could also add that
Sure.
the technology is moving faster than we can put regulations in place. I mean, a lot of data centers now, I understand, there's a more advanced wind cooling operation than the way they've used the water, and it's more conservative in its usage of water. So we're so many steps behind where the technology is going, and I think Bob and I have talked about this, that you're planning a scenario that may not at all be the scenario that technology has taken us into. So I think that's a big part of the riddle uh, how do we get ahead of what is, we can't even see how fast it's moving. And I think that's going to be something the task force is going to have to really look at.
Yeah, and to Beth's point, like Google's TPU chip is using a lot less
Mhm,
water than the chips in
mhm,
the past. So we are kind of, it is outrunning us big time.
Yeah, and that's another piece of it with energy usage too, is that, as technology advances, that you've got, perhaps significant reductions in the amount of electricity needed.
mhm,
So the
mhm,
balance of how
So,
much to build, how much infrastructure, you can overbuild, but you can also underbuild, and getting that timing right is important for ratepayers.
exactly, Greg. And I think that's why Beth and I would tell you that we had to extend this task force because all
mhm.
of those issues are to be dealt with. Are we overbuilding? How do we deal with if somebody shuts down all at one moment on the grid? All these things are out there, and we just haven't got to it in 6 to 8 months.
Mhm.
All right, so the next question I've got is, can someone speak to specifically offshore? To the, that we have an offshore workforce here in Louisiana, of course, has supported the offshore oil and gas industry for a long time. We've got the maritime workforce, and specifically how perhaps, we've seen a slowdown, of course, in offshore wind, given federal changes. Any thoughts on implications of that for the offshore workforce in Louisiana?
I'll touch it. Doesn't look like anybody else wants to. Back home in my district, we would be supportive of offshore wind. Um, I've got two of my biggest employees that have built platforms for a living for years, and their abilities go to that technology very easy, and they're very interested in it. I have sat at LSU Energy Studies enough to know that it is by far one of the most expensive electricities to generate. And so I think between the federal tax credits going away and the fact that it is expensive for the power grid and it will pass on higher rates to utility customers, I think that's why we've seen a slowdown in it.
All right, that sounds great. So I have one question specifically on House Bill 7 by Representative Mike Johnson. I know it's none of y'all's bills, but we do have a question on it. Enacts the Louisiana Landowner Protection Act, pending House Natural Resources. Any thoughts or comments on this or related legislation?
What was the question? Was it a
Uh,
specific question,
it's just a
or you
question
have a
about House
question?
Bill 7.
Oh, just House
Yeah,
Bill 7. Well, House
yeah.
Bill 7 is the bill by Speaker Pro Tem Mike Johnson.
Yep.
It has a number of co-authors on the House side. It's a House bill. It is the one bill that I know of that is dealing with the issue of eminent domain. Like I mentioned earlier in the webinar, there could be, I may have seen another author who had an eminent domain bill, but this is the bill, and it will be the one that we debate and hear in our committee. That will be the bill on eminent domain dealing with CO2. And that's if I remember the bill specifically, and I've read it a number of times, but it deals with both the storage uh, and on the transportation side. So it deals with the pipeline piece and the storage piece all in one bill. So
Yeah,
if anyone's watching that subject matter and has interest in it, either for or against, either way, if you have interest in it, that is the bill to keep your eye on, House Bill 7 on our
yeah,
side. No,
I think
Bob
so
has
too.
some.
I think so too. And I don't comment on House bills until they're read into the Senate. I don't know what they're going to look like when they get there. But I know that, Chairman Guyman is going to give it a fair hearing and we've all read it. So yeah,
Sounds great.
And
I'll
I
just
think
put
you
that
have
in.
one. I think, is there not one on the Senate side too, Bob?
there
Or do
is one
you?
along the same line on the Senate
Yeah,
side. That's correct.
yeah. I'd heard that. I hadn't looked at the Senate bills either because, like same as you, we have our hands full with the House bills right now. But
Mhm.
That sounds great. So related to that, and this was one of my questions I had pre, but I'll, pivots nicely with this one is, there have been these discussions of local control, especially with CCS. So you give examples about alcohol sales, gambling. These have been activities that historically the legislature has said that, look, a parish can decide. On the flip side, of course, you can give an example like oil and gas drilling that the state has said, no, this is a statewide thing and you can't necessarily ban that in a certain area. You could then go to wastewater disposal associated with oil and gas, for instance, and it really is this continuum. Can y'all give thoughts on, how do we think about federal regulation, state level regulation, local regulation? You don't necessarily have to comment on the local control bills if you don't want, but can you give some perspective and thoughts of how do you tackle that as a legislator and balance that?
You want me to go first, Bob?
Yeah, it's all in your committee, so go for
Oh, you don't have one of those? Uh, Greg, I think it's a great question, and you hit it. You can argue that subject on both sides. You can argue that for gambling, for other things that we allow local control. And for instance, the solar bill last year started out. Many in the industry wanted a statewide ordinance, and then what ended up happening before, as it got to the House floor, was that we heard from parishes that they wanted to regulate it. They wanted their own thumbprint. And so we amended on the House floor to allow, or we're going to amend on the House floor to allow for local control on the solar ordinances. And so I think what ended up happening in the amendment that Senator Hengens ultimately put in was we allowed the local parishes to opt out and do their own ordinance. So it's a mixed bag. I mean, I think you can make the argument on both sides, and these bills are going to be debated thoroughly. I think this will get much, if not all, of the the attention on debate because it is so interesting to hear the two sides, and it'll be interesting to see how our committee ends up viewing that and which way they weigh in. But it's definitely, and look, even people who are anti-carbon capture have mixed views on whether the locals should weigh in or not. And so it's interesting to hear and watch from, what's going on the outside, even within certain camps, either for or against, you have mixed opinions on whether we should allow local control over the carbon capture issue. And that's what I was speaking of, the carbon capture. So.
And I think you're going to see that even local police juries and local government entities are going to have different opinions on that.
That's right.
I talked to my parish president day before yesterday. Please don't give me this. We don't have the expertise. We don't have the this. So you're going to have that conversation where with solar, we were dealing with how does it look and how does it feel and how big of a setback from my road. They were willing to deal with that. Trying to permit or say yes or no on a permit, the main parish pretty much don't want to say yes or no on a permit. They don't want it. So you're going to see different parishes have different opinions on that too, I think.
Yeah, and no, that's a good point, Bob. And I'd say even on solar, some parishes told me that we don't have the expertise to even do the solar. So can y'all please do it at the state level? And they don't really they really don't want to have to deal with it. They'd rather just the state say, hey, here's the guidelines for it, and you go do it. And then you had other parishes like I represent and live in Calcasieu currently, and they were fine with doing their own ordinance because they feel like they had the expertise and the resources to get it done. So, and then you take carbon capture, which is much, much, much more complex, and so that argument extends to that as well.
And going back to the solar, and that's why Representative Coates finally settled on kind of a hybrid model. We have the state ordinance, but if the local wants to do more, less, they can. That's correct.
That's correct.
It's just easier to put laws in, excuse me, on what you can see than what you can't see. I think the solar people weren't intimidated by the solar like they are about the CCS because you knew what you were getting. I think a lot of the questions on the CCS is that you've got two schools of thought on what you're getting. So, or what down the road's going to look like. But yeah, you're exactly right. My parish, and you probably remember this, Bob, but years ago, when we were working on that, my parish was trying, and they're like not at all energy experts, but they're trying to come up with the regulations on solar. And it devastated my community because they were trying to put the genie back in the bottle that had already been allowed, and it poisoned the well for every solar facility that came. So we've got to get in front of this with some outline of what the locals, what's reasonable, or give them some guidance, because otherwise every technology is going to be dead on arrival if we're not prepared for it. That's what happened in my parish anyway. So
Yeah, so a related and
Go ahead,
no,
Greg.
go on. No, you go on.
No, I'm just saying it's hard to put a pipeline with 64 different regulations through the state of Louisiana. And
yeah.
class six injection wells, only 3 or 4 states have the ability to permit those besides the federal government. Uh, there's some technical stuff in there. And so we're going to have to work through that, and we're going to have those conversations. And I look forward to listening to them.
So really a question, and I'm really curious to hear your thoughts, is that there's a lot of discussion of federal subsidies and how those impact local economic activity. So of course, CCS is a good example. We could talk about wind and solar tax credits. You could talk about ag subsidies such as the Farm Bill. What do y'all see as the role of the legislature in terms of, one approach might be, look, we don't control federal tax policy. And, we can create a regulatory environment here that people can choose to move forward or not move forward based upon, the economics that they see, which includes taxes. Of course, assuming that it's safe and you check all of the kind of local boxes. Another approach might be, look, I disagree with this federal policy, and therefore we're going to make it more difficult to do this economic activity that's been subsidized by the federal government. How do you guys balance this? I know I hear this in committee a lot. I know I hear this out in the public. Can y'all just talk to me about how you think about that?
You first again, Geymann.
What's that?
You first again. That's your committee again.
That's not my committee. That's a Senate committee. Greg, I think they're first. I think the reality of all this is wind, solar, carbon capture, ethanol. All of the things that are subsidized is that they're subsidized in some way from the federal government through an incentive as an incentive. My view is, and it's just my view, that we just have to navigate and deal with what is handed to us, and we can't control whether or not an administration gives a tax credit or a tax subsidy to a particular technology. But if it's out there and the industry is trying to benefit from it, then we have to navigate that. We have to make sure it's safe. We have to make sure it's done the best way possible. And of course, the argument on carbon capture is whether we should allow it or not. And it does kind of cross over into that discussion. But generally speaking, I think, and even in the governor's words, I think these were his words, is if a area wants it, great. If they don't, then they don't have to have it. So he kind of has the same, it seems like has that same view of, it's out there. If they want to do it, great. If they don't, great. But I just feel like we as legislators have to navigate what's handed to us. We're state reps and state senators. We can't control what happens at the federal level. We just have to make the best of whatever comes our way and do the best we can to make sure it's safe and that it's handled in the best way possible, whether you agree with it or not. That's my view.
And I totally agree. I don't think we are at the federal level. We don't decide what Europe does with a CBAM adjustment. We don't decide what the federal government does with tax credits. Between the businesses and the government, if they want to come and do it, let's do it. But like Brett said, our role is to make sure whatever's going on is safe and good for our people.
Right, but on that, we've been working with this little Ireland Trade Commission, and it does connect to this. So, if we're going to talk to them about selling our LNG to Ireland, which is an absolutely incredible opportunity, they expect us to participate in all these initiatives. So I think it's a precarious situation where I know some of my local leadership is like, we don't want to do anything that is going to be funded with a subsidy. Well, sometimes that's the only way to sweeten the situation to get people to participate. So to me, we're not we're not looking at the detriment to the industries we want to protect in Louisiana if we're cutting out what uh, other countries are looking at, whether they want to participate with us. So I just think it's an interesting situation because that's part of the deciding factor of my locals. They don't want to offer any kind of allowances if there's a company coming in that's already got a government subsidy. But a lot of these technologies, I don't know how we get to come to Louisiana without some sort of a subsidy situation. So uh,
It, and I think that's a new conversation. That's a new
it is.
conversation we've only heard in the last 3 or 4 years, and I'm not sure where the end of that conversation is. Can I not ride on the railroad anymore? I mean, or do we not let a railroad come through the state of Louisiana
Right,
in 1887 because it was paid for by the government?
right, right.
And it's a strange conversation, but it's one that we are obviously having.
And it's one of those things where kind of how I feel about my locals. If they don't want to take a project, don't come to me for capital outlay. That's kind of how I feel about it. If
Same.
we don't want to take projects with federal subsidies, how do we keep asking for federal money? There's got to be a cooperative arrangement that is not to the detriment of either side.
Yeah,
And
no, that's a
and
great.
through
Is that why you?
and through all of this, still trying to represent the people and their wishes.
Right, exactly. And that where it gets sticky.
Y'all have the easiest job, clearly, everything through. Yeah, but Senator Mizell, it's a great point too. You could escalate it to the international level with suppose that there's some international policy that impacts a company globally and what product they
Right,
want to purchase and
right.
how do we at the local level let that impact the regulation and the permitting? That's a hard
Mm-hmm,
question.
mm-hmm.
So I've got a related question here about policy uncertainty and in particular the person says stable policy environment. And one of the things, again, I hear debated a lot is, on one hand, you've got some nascent industry coming in, and you ask the question of, okay, should we go in and set the rules of the game, if you will, that creates regulatory certainty for that industry to how do they move forward and how do they navigate the rules? On the flip side, you'll hear it said, well, look, it's too early. We got to wait and see what happens. The technology's too early to put those rules in place. How do y'all balance that as regulators of making sure that companies have regulatory certainty, they know the rules, without creating that framework so early that then it's hard to amend and change later as that technology rapidly develops?
And Greg, let me answer it a little bit by saying this. I guess if we're talking data center type stuff and carbon capture type stuff, uh, we're not really on the front of the data center stuff. We're probably second wave, right? So we know what happened in Northern Virginia. We know what happened with
Mm-hmm.
PJM. So when we're starting to talk about how do we regulate for our water, how do we regulate to make sure our retail customers in the the electricity world are not getting raked over the fire. We know what went wrong. We know what regulations they're starting to put on in other states because of their past. So we need to hold a conversation about what the framework is before it even starts. And
Mm-hmm.
so the carbon capture one, it might be a little bit more legit that, but we do need to make sure that our residents are safe and we need to make sure that they feel safe. And without shutting down an industry, I think it is our job to split that baby and try to figure out how do we say yes, you can come and we want you here. But I have to remember, I go back home to Vermilion Parish, and my voters in Vermilion Parish need to feel safe about this. And so, yeah, we don't want to overregulate. When we change regulations, we probably need to pause a while, like we're doing on solar, and not change every 3 weeks. But to say let it be the wild, wild west and do nothing before it gets here, I don't think is an option either.
No, and just real quick, Bob, we have good examples. We can see where it has not been in a positive experience, like with Virginia, but we don't have to rebuild the wheel. I mean, there are states who have done it right and are pleased with the outcome. So, I mean, I believe there's some models out there that we could look at that would give us some direction. So, we're not having to do this with no idea, is what I'm saying.
Mhm.
Yeah, right.
Sounds great. So the next question is from David Mitchell at The Advocate. So I'll read it specifically. It says, are you aware of any CCS pipeline project that has gone to the court to get the ruling that under your legislation adopted last year in the big bill would give the pipeline expropriation power? Or are we waiting for the first decision? Any good contenders for that first decision? So I guess that's a question about testing the statutes that were the laws that were passed within the courts regarding expropriation power for CCS pipelines.
So I guess referring to the common carrier language from the last session, I would think is what the question was about.
That is my presumption. It's in the chat
Okay.
from or the question from
To
David
my
Mitchell.
knowledge, unless Senator Hengens knows of something, I don't think that anyone has gotten that far.
Mhm.
I don't know of anyone that has applied for the common carrier certificate of convenience for CO2, at least to my knowledge. And what that new threshold is, if that CO2 is being used for permanent storage, for sequestration, permanent storage. And so I don't think we don't have a site yet except for Hackberry. And, so I don't think we're there yet. So I don't know that it's been tested, David. And it'll be interesting to see if anyone even tries to get the common carrier status, which would mean that you have to be available for multiple vendors and in performing a public benefit and the things that come along with the common carrier definition.
Great. And he did clarify, yes, it is the common carrier. So just to
Yeah,
clarify
I
that.
think unless Bob knows something different or Beth, I think the answer is no. Not to my knowledge, no one
No, no,
has even applied for that permit yet.
and I don't think so either. And I'll be surprised when if anyone does, on that. Oh, and Greg, I've got a text from a regulator on the side said you called us all regulators a while ago, and that we're not. One of the regulators in the state of Louisiana on this thing said you called us regulators and we're not. So I just
I
got a text.
apologize. Policymakers, legislators, yes. All right, so with that, we've got about 5 minutes left. I just want to pass it around to each of you, provide any closing thoughts, any final thoughts of what we should expect or be thinking about with session coming up. So we'll go backwards from the way we started. I'll start with you, Senator Mizell.
I think it's going to be interesting to see what these two gentlemen do in their committees and what makes it to the floor. So I just want to give them a pat on the back for their leadership. I think we're in good hands with the level of commitment both of these chairmen have on the issues we're talking about. But we are in uncharted territory. I think we're going to look back, our grandkids are going to look back and think we really did a good job or we really messed this up. So hopefully they can look back and think we've done a good job. But thank you, Greg. Thank you, LSU, for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Senator Henskins.
I know I want to echo what Senator Mizell said. I think this is very interesting times. Uh, Brett and I have committees that are some of the busiest committees in the building. If you'd have came to the Natural Resources Committees 20 years ago, they were 10-minute committees that were very, very boring. We are blessed to not be in boring times. We are also cursed to not be in boring times sometimes. I am totally interested in Senator Mizell's task force. I know it's not really of the session, but it is some of the most incredible work and fun work that I've done since I've been up there. And so I think that as much as anything. And again, we have a few bills that will be tough in the Senate, and we'll be waiting to see what the House does. And again, thank you all, not just for this, Greg, again, all the in-servicing that you've done for me over the last year. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's an honor to help. All right, Representative Geymann, you got the last word.
Well, thank you, Greg, for doing this, and thank you to both my colleagues. Beth, thank you for all of the pressure you just put on Bob and I for this session, and thank you for your work, by the way. And can't think of anybody I'd rather serve with than you and Bob on this. And we are in challenging times, we're in exciting times, and as you said, we'll look back a decade from now, 2 decades from now, and we'll have to decide whether we did it right or not. And hopefully the answer is we did good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thank y'all for y'all service. I know how much I know how exhausted I get just watching a session at arm's length. So I can't imagine how exhausting it is for you guys. So best of luck with everything, and thank you so much for participating today. We had the attendance at the webinar went all the way consistent all the way to the end, which is not usual for webinars. So it was an engaging discussion. Thanks everyone again for coming, and we'll see you soon.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Thanks. Thank you.